AWS gives you a reliable VPC network and it gives you reliable VPC internet access. Well, what are we missing here? Well, maybe you need a way to reliably access your VPC resources from an on-premises network, such as an office or a data center. When it comes to connecting your VPC to an on-prem network, you have two options: the expensive option and the less expensive option. The expensive option is a direct connect link, which is a private dedicated link to AWS. The less expensive option is a virtual private network or VPN connection over the public internet. So let's start with the expensive option, a direct connect link. Direct Connect gives you a low latency connection to an AWS region. Because it's a private connection, it completely bypasses the internet. That means you won't have to deal with internet traffic competing with your AWS traffic, and you won't have the problem of high latency like you do with an internet connection. When it comes to direct connect connections, there are two types: dedicated and hosted. A dedicated connection is a physical connection that terminates at what Amazon calls a direct connect location. AWS has these connections in various data centers around the country, and if you're fortunate enough to have your equipment in one of these data centers, you can buy a 1 or 10 gig dedicated direct connect connection. You connect your networking equipment to it and you are good to go. But if you don't have a presence in a direct connect location, you can buy a hosted connection from a direct connect partner, which is usually going to be a local internet service provider. This is a last mile connection that comes to you, that is, it comes to your office, your data center, and you can get it in speeds ranging from 50 megabits per second to 10 gigs. The less expensive option is a virtual private network, a VPN connection. This is an encrypted IPsec connection over the public internet, which means potentially high latency. There are two ways you can implement a VPN connection: with a virtual private gateway or with a transit gateway. The virtual private gateway is the original way to implement VPNs on AWS. It lets you establish a VPN tunnel with only one VPC. Now, in the old days, if you wanted to connect your on-prem network to multiple VPCs, you would need to create multiple separate virtual private gateways and VPN tunnels for each VPC. If you have a lot of VPCs, then that takes a lot of work to set up and it does not scale well. And that brings us to the newer and better way to implement a VPN connection: the transit gateway. Think of this as a virtual router that can establish multiple VPN connections with multiple on-prem networks and multiple VPCs and multiple direct connect connections. The way it works is very simple. You create a transit gateway and use it to create as many VPN connections as you need. The transit gateway actually terminates the VPN connections, so there is no need to use a virtual private gateway. You then attach the transit gateway to your VPC subnets. The transit gateway acts as the hub for all of these connections. Now, why would you want to do this? Remember, the name of the game is reliability. The transit gateway makes it easy to have multiple connections to the VPC. So you can have a direct connect connection as your primary, for example, and a VPN connection as a standby if your direct link goes down. You control how traffic is routed through the transit gateway by using transit gateway route tables. So for example, let's say you have a VPN connection and two VPCs connected to your transit gateway. You use a route table to control whether traffic is allowed between the VPC subnets. Likewise, you can control whether traffic is allowed between a VPC subnet and a VPN. You can also block or black hole traffic altogether. For example, let's say you want to block traffic from one particular instance in a VPC. You can do that using a transit gateway. One other nice feature of the transit gateway is that it supports multicast. This goes beyond the scope of the course, but I want to mention it because before the transit gateway existed, AWS did not support multicast at all.